Spoiler warning! In this video, I will be discussing the key plot points to both the manga and the Dragon Ball Super anime series in detail. You have been warned. The Dragon Ball manga ran its initial serialization way back in the 80s and 90s. During those 10 plus years of publication, a young, bright-eyed mangaka, author of a Japanese comic, named Akira Toriyama captained the illustration ship that was the Dragon Ball series. That which started as a simple story with a simple art style, evolved into a more complex narrative with an instantly recognizable style and rabid fan base. To say that his artwork captured the hearts and minds of children and adults throughout the globe is an understatement. He revolutionized the industry, and even today we are still seeing homages to his work everywhere. We see them on TV shows, comics, games, anime, you name it. And if you were a kid like me growing up in the 90s and the early 2000s, you'd agree that it was a near impossibility to avoid seeing those blonde spikes at some stage. Alright, so let me convey something to you guys. Let me just lay this down for you. In the 90s, I didn't read the Dragon Ball manga. I'll hold my hand up, I was like 7, and at that stage in my life, I was still getting praised for finishing my dinner and tying my shoes. That and the internet sounded like this. So yeah, that wasn't an option either. Fast forward like 15 years and I was working a night shift. The day prior, I got it in my head that I just had to buy some of the Dragon Ball manga from my local comic book store. I ended up bringing about 6 of them to work that night, thinking I was going to read through most of one and, use the rest as reference when drawing. No joke, I binged through every manga that I brought with me that night. In that moment, I understood exactly what caused this series to take off in Japan in the 80s. The style was simple, emotive, with a great sense of humor and pacing. Suddenly, I could relive all my favorite moments in their original form. It was like some kind of personal Dragon Ball renaissance. And it couldn't have come at a better time, because this shit happened. A new Dragon Ball series, and Akira Toriyama is coming back as showrunner. Are you serious? Are you fucking... And that's not all. We were getting a shiny new manga to accompany the announced anime series. And the best thing about this was it was arriving a month sooner than the anime. Now, naturally, my walking for the coming days was thrown off to accommodate this giant Dragon Ball boner I had, but it got me thinking, if Akira was to be showrunner, then who's illustrating the manga?
Holy shit!
Enter this man. Many of you might not have seen or heard of this guy. Heck, I can't even find his real name online. And the only pictures I can find of him are this, and this heavily touted self-portrait. But for the sake of my sanity, let's use this one. This is Toible, or Toyotaro as he's chosen to go by nowadays. If this name sounds familiar to you, then it might be due to this not being Toyotaro's first time illustrating a Dragon Ball manga. 16 years back, at the turn of the millennium, God, I feel old, Toyotaro was illustrating his own Dragon Ball spin-off manga fanfiction called Dragon Ball AF, and really that's how Toriyama found him. In an interview conducted in the spring of 2016, Toriyama had this to say: "Speaking of reproducing my style, Toyotaro-san is amazing at it. You might actually be the closest to my style. There aren't many people who can manage that. Well, maybe there are people who can imitate my pictures, but not many artists can pull off an entire chapter the way you can. Your storyboards are really tight." Well, it's great to think that Toriyama thinks his chapters are really tight, because Toyotaro is now in charge of continuing on the manga's legacy that Toriyama began building with Dragon Ball Chapter 1 way back in the mid-80s. So, naturally you might be thinking, okay, well, the man can emulate Toriyama's style. What else is there to look at here? Well, in that same interview, Toyotaro dropped this little nugget of information. "Since Chapter 1, I've used Toriyama-sensei's plot as a basis, but have been allowed to expand on it. And again, in an interview later that year, what I received from Toriyama is literally words on paper, without drawings or anything. So when I'm reading it, I have to fill in the blanks as far as the specifics are concerned. This must mean that the anime staff over at Toei have the same kind of creative freedom when following Akira Toriyama's notes. There are plot points from A to B, but how they get between those two can vary hugely, allowing room for imagination as well as interesting differences. That is what we are here to discuss today. We are going to compare Dragon Ball Super's anime with Toyotaro's manga interpretation to help you find where the differences lie. So let's begin. This is Dragon Ball Super's anime versus manga. Chapter 1, The God of Destruction's Prophetic Dream. Chapter 1 of Dragon Ball Super's manga is pretty much episode 1 of the anime. Usually manga chapters cover much more of the animated series, but for whatever reason, this chapter covers exactly 1 episode. Beginning and ending with almost the same shots too. So where are the differences, you might be asking? Well, the biggest and most glaring visual difference comes in the very first scene. This is the scene in question. Goku requests Goten to take the tractor for a period of time to allow him to train. Goten then naturally gets distracted by his father's activities, causing him to drive off a cliff. Now, both the anime and the manga tackle this in very different ways. The anime's interpretation of this is very by-the-books and regimented. The manga decided to get creative and give us some insight into what Goku was envisioning as he was training instead of focusing on Goten's reactions. Goku envisions past battles with Frieza, Cell, and Buu. The anime's power in this scene is suspense. Is Goku going to notice Goten in time before he falls? Whereas the manga decided to let Goten's fall be the surprise, distracting the viewer by the action in Goku's mind. Both took very different approaches in their opening scene, and as you can see, ultimately ended in the same place. Moving on chronologically, Chapter 1's next difference comes with the introduction of none other than Lord Beerus. I'm sure many of you are familiar with how we first meet our god of destruction in the anime, on a planet with pig-like inhabitants searching for delicious cuisines, no less. Now, in the manga, he is in search of great food, but the pig people in the anime have been replaced with beings closely resembling caterpillars in the manga. More importantly, however, these bug creatures are hatching a sinister plot to kill Lord Beerus by poisoning him with the very food he's tasting. Those fiends! This is a far cry already from the anime's interpretation, where the pig people were clearly terrified of even looking at him. Of course, the manga's Beerus is unaffected by the poison and knows precisely the nefarious schemes these caterpillar men had. With their plan exposed, the bug people unload a flurry of lasers at Lord Beerus and Whis. In response to this, Beerus destroys their entire planet. A far cry from the anime's version, which saw only half of the planet get destroyed for much different reasons. Narratively speaking, there are a lot of different choices at play here. The anime's Beerus is more respected and feared, whereas the manga's version shows that he has heightened self-awareness and demonstrates power in a more convincing way. Moving swiftly on, the manga's telling of the briefcase exchange between Goku and Mr. Satan takes place during the day, immediately after the incident with Goten. In the anime, it's implied that a fair amount of time had passed, and that perhaps Goku and Goten had spent the day together before Mr. Satan arrives with the prize money. The final noteworthy moment of this chapter comes when Beerus recalls his dream about the Super Saiyan God. He remembers it, and I swear, as he's eating soup Yasai Jinkot. In the anime, Beerus recalls his dream when he sees the explosion of a planet he's destroyed. Chapter 2. Goku's Defeat. The very first panel of this chapter reveals the Oracle Fish to say, "You will come face to face with the Super Saiyan God." So at this point, we've already skipped episode 2, but brushing that aside, the first panel is already after taking a different turn to the anime. In that, the Oracle Fish is much more of a comedic character as opposed to the straight one he's portrayed as in the manga. Immediately following this confirmation by the Oracle Fish, however, Whis goes on to explain the harsh fate that has befallen Planet Vegeta at the hands of Frieza, and informs Beerus that a Saiyan by the name of Son Goku had defeated him. In response to this news, Beerus decides to immediately go to the Northern Kai's world in search of Goku. The biggest difference with this exchange in the anime is that it happens over the course of a much longer span of time, both in story and reality. In the anime, these plot points are discussed upon his arrival, in his living quarters, and his bathhouse before he decides to finally pursue Goku. Heck, a full episode is dedicated to covering this in the anime, whereas in the manga, it is covered, and I kid you not, in 2 pages. An entire episode is covered in 2 pages. Moving quickly on, we switch to Goku training on King Kai's world where he is not wearing the blue jogging suit he is in the anime. Instead, he's wearing his butt-kicking clothes, as King Kai so eloquently put it in Battle of Gods.
Why are you wearing your butt-kicking clothes?
However, Goku notices something is up with King Kai, and when asked once, King Kai spills the beans about Lord Beerus making his way towards them. In the anime, King Kai and the Supreme Kai try to keep this information from Goku, knowing that he would almost certainly try to fight him, which he does. But I'll get to that. Continuing in the manga, King Kai goes on to explain what exactly Beerus is and why Goku shouldn't fight him. Much to King Kai's chagrin, however, Goku shows his excitement and states, "I definitely want to try fighting him." King Kai's reaction to this is soon interrupted by the arriving Lord Beerus, accompanied by Whis, whom after overhearing this, immediately agrees with Goku's request to fight him. This differs greatly to the anime's interpretation, in which Goku has been forced into King Kai's house to hide from Lord Beerus until he is finally coaxed out of hiding at a later stage. So at this point, we've really hit the fast forward button on both episodes 3 and 4, covering all of Goku and Beerus' scenes in just 4 pages. 2 for episode 3 and 2 more for episode 4. The most notable difference in motivation here comes from Beerus. In the manga, he clearly arrives with the intention of coming to blows with Goku, or at least to test him. In the anime, his intentions are only to inquire about the Super Saiyan God. It's Goku that begs Beerus for a match. They begin fighting, and as the first fight of the manga, I have to say it's so awesome to see Dragon Ball illustrated in this classic way once again. If you haven't had a chance to check out a Dragon Ball fight in manga form, I highly recommend it. During the manga's battle, Beerus is confused when he sees Goku's Super Saiyan form. Whis has to inform him exactly what it is as he is fighting. In the anime, Beerus learns about the Super Saiyan transformation through Whis' demonstration and how Frieza was defeated by Goku back on Beerus' homeworld. The battle continues, and already we can notice there are a few key differences in this scene. In the anime's version, Beerus doesn't exert himself enough to block a single punch of Goku's until he maxes out Super Saiyan 3. But in the manga, we can clearly see him blocking numerous strikes from Goku while in Super Saiyan 2. The anime's version of Beerus is much more composed in this scene, almost bored by this encounter. In the manga, he seems like he is enjoying it more, definitely not bored. However, this could be a result of Beerus not knowing what Goku is capable of. But the biggest difference in this chapter decides to rear its head midways through this fight. For one page, we see Vados and Champa traveling through space. During my research for this, I was surprised to see them so early on in the series, seeing as in the anime we don't see them until episode 18. At this point in the manga, we don't know what they are doing. All we know is that they are up to something that they want to keep under wraps from Beerus and Whis. The second half of the fight resumes after this and reaches the same conclusion as in the anime. Goku knocked out after a blow from Beerus. The second half of this fight clearly takes inspiration from the Battle of Gods movie version of this fight. Heck, panels look as if they're stripped straight from the movie. And with that, both the manga and the anime head for Earth. Chapter 3. Beerus' Wrath. After Goku wakes with a sense of impending doom, it cuts to Beerus beating up the guests of Bulma's party. Gohan, Majin Buu, and Goten, to name a few. The only difference being that in the anime, we see the build up to this moment instead of just being thrust into the middle of it, like the manga elected to do. As Piccolo is about to join the fray, Vegeta stops him. It is in that moment the manga shows us Vegeta's history with Beerus through flashback. The manga utilizes some really powerful panels, I have to say. The anime took a slightly different approach with the scene, however. Not the flashback per se, but the timing at which the flashback was implemented. In the anime, Vegeta had his Beerus flashback when he first saw him, which to some people might be more powerful. This is immediately interrupted by none other than Bulma, who marches up to and slaps Lord Beerus, the god of destruction. Thus, the affectionately named My Bulma scene unfolds as you would expect. The manga had some really powerful angles and illustrations here. This one of Vegeta blasting Beerus straight from the bottom of the ocean is a highlight for sure. But what happened next doesn't happen in the anime at all. As Vegeta's burst of rage continues, the Kais converse over how awful it is that Beerus, the god of destruction, has found his way to Earth. In that moment, the Elder Kai notices that another planet in a far-off corner of the galaxy has completely disappeared. Naturally, this confuses the bejeebus out of the Kais, and so they check out to see what's up. Unsurprisingly, it's Vados and Champa, who let slip that they are collecting wish orbs. The Elder Kai and Supreme Kai believe that they are referring to the Dragon Balls. And really, they're not wrong. But Vados and Champa notice their eavesdropping and suddenly appear before the two Kais, much to their dismay and surprise. They arrive to see if the Kais had heard anything, which they had. Fortunately though for the Kais, they are top-notch actors, and Champa's suspicions are eased quicker than you'd expect. In actuality, I believe this to be subtle character exposition for Champa's slightly dim-witted personality. But it's also nice to see these characters interact, seeing as we don't see much of it in the anime. Vados and Champa take their leave, allowing the Kais to compose themselves. They recall that Champa had mentioned huge wish orbs. Instantly, they conclude that they must have meant the Namekian Dragon Balls. Without hesitation, they begin orchestrating a plan to acquire and protect the Dragon Balls from those two. With that, we switch back to the confrontation between Beerus and Vegeta. As Vegeta is about to accept his fate at the hands of Beerus, Goku suddenly appears between the two using his instant transmission technique. Goku's introduction to this scene here is quite different from the anime, in which he announces his presence as he stands atop the tallest structure of the ship, before he clumsily scurries down it, of course. But, like the anime, Goku's got a plan to spare the Earth a horrible fate at the hands of Lord Beerus. Chapter 4. Battle of Gods. Now, the beginning of this chapter might rub some folks the wrong way, or, well, maybe the right way. Different strokes for different folks. But, to be honest, it did catch me off guard. And it all centered around the summoning of the Super Saiyan God. So, here it is. Shenron being summoned, the exposition of the Super Saiyan God ritual, the revelation of Vidal's pregnancy, the actual Super Saiyan God ritual, and the Super Saiyan God transformation, it all happens on one page. Which is impressive considering all that takes place in an entire episode in the anime, episode 9 to be exact. The manga and anime then continue in unison with the Battle of the Gods. Beerus, the god of destruction, versus Super Saiyan God Goku. And like the battle before on King Kai's planet, there are a few significant changes worth noting. The manga opted to have the opening fight sequence take place in a city, again, much like the Battle of Gods movie, whereas the anime decided to keep it at sea, away from civilization. Worth noting also in the manga, Goku never once voiced his displeasure in acquiring this power through the help of others. In episode 12 of the anime, the narrative centers around the fist clashes Beerus and Goku have and the repercussions of those collisions. The manga has only one fist clash, and while it is felt by the Kais, they don't make a big deal out of it. Certainly not in a way that affects the flow of the fight. Also, in the manga, they clash on Earth, not in the stratosphere. It's at this point you might notice that the fight is actually reaching its conclusion. And you'll probably also notice that this is significantly shorter than the anime's version. This is most likely due to the only reference for the manga at the time being the Battle of Gods movie, which because of its format had a much shorter fight between Beerus and Goku than the anime offered. That said, the closing moments of the manga's battle contains a stunning panel very reminiscent of Goku's blast against Vegeta in the Saiyan arc of DBZ. It's a spectacular illustration and caps off the confrontation beautifully. The final difference comes at the very end. Goku fades to base form after that final burst in defense of Earth. Suddenly, Whis arrives to declare the match unsettled. The manga's version has Beerus directly tell Goku that because of his efforts, he will spare the Earth. Quite different from the anime's telling, which had Beerus pretend to fall asleep mid-blast, continuing the destroyer facade, allowing them to think they narrowly escaped a grim demise. Beerus and Whis peace out, which makes the old Kai all sorts of happy, who brings to our attention that the Supreme Kibito Kai has used the Namekian Dragon Balls to revert back into two people once again. None of this is shown in the anime, and I think it's pretty awesome to see the backstory as to how they came to separate, considering we don't see them separated in the anime until the Universe 6 arc. And that's not even where this chapter ends, actually. I mean, you'd figure that the conclusion to the battle would do it, but it does continue. And it's actually our first sign of Frieza's army, with Champa destroying one of the ships no less. Word reaches Sorbet, now the leader of the Frieza Force, who was residing on planet Frieza number 17. Catchy name? In the anime, Champa doesn't just destroy some random ship from Frieza's army. Himself and Vados simply fly past one ship which is being led by Sorbet, and as they fly by, cause a ton of damage to the ship. However, both versions ultimately get us to the same spot. Sorbet coming to the conclusion that Frieza's resurrection is the only course of action he has left. Chapter 5. Beerus and Champa. So, at the beginning of this chapter, you might, notice that the small difference, well, the Frieza, Sorbet, they're not there. And there's actually a really good reason why you might be thinking that. They skipped it. They skipped the whole damn thing. Talk about being the ugly stepchild of the franchise. Poor resurrection of F. But hey, I'm not complaining. It kept them ahead of the anime, plus this was the first time we were all seeing some new Dragon Ball content that wasn't a movie. Up to this point, both the manga and the anime had been rehashing the events of the prior two films. So the feeling in the community around this time was that of positivity and excitement, to say the least. So this chapter picks up not exactly where we left off, but with Jeets and Goku on Beerus' world training under Whis. And it's during this training session we see Super Saiyan Blue for the very first time in the manga. But that's not all. It's also the chapter that coined the term Super Saiyan Blue. Up until this point in both the anime and the movies, they had used the moniker Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan. Rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Fun fact, in the character design sheets for Super Saiyan Blue that Akira Toriyama prepared, the name Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan is written on it. I guess it took him a little bit to gather the inspiration necessary to bridle the sheer genius that is Super Saiyan Blue's name. Although the anime did use the name Super Saiyan God Super Saiyan, once it reached the Universe 6 arc, they switched to Super Saiyan Blue for good. And to think, it all stemmed from one manga panel featuring Whis. But how did this come up in conversation in the manga? Well, the form was introduced to the scene while Vegeta and Goku were in a no power-up combat exercise. If you're curious, Vegeta is the one who violates the rules by drawing first blue. Goku soon follows suit, and as punishment, Whis puts them into weighted bodysuits. In the anime, episode 28 begins with Vegeta and Goku in those heavy suits. We never really got to see what led up to that moment. What's more is Champa's introduction to the scene. Both himself and Vados suddenly appear behind Whis in the manga, but in the anime they crash land in an attempt to reveal themselves to Beerus in a grandiose fashion, which they completely fail in doing, by the way. The scene continues, and like the anime, both Beerus and Champa have the who has the best food showdown. In the same scene, Whis explains that there are 12 universes and they decide to have the Universal Tournament. It's all gravy like the anime. One small difference is that this takes place outside in the manga instead of inside as it was depicted in the anime. Also, before the decision on having the Universe 6 tournament in the anime was made, both Champa and Beerus have a small scuffle. This does not happen in the manga at all. It's significantly more civil. Chapter 6. Preparing for the Tournament. This chapter begins by showing us the very fight that Champa and Beerus had long ago before Whis convinced them to switch to a battle of foods and not brawn. In this sequence there are some spectacular looking illustrations and Champa even punches a planet into smithereens. The anime only covered this through dialogue. We never actually got to see it. So those of you interested in seeing how that fight transpired, I highly recommend checking out this chapter for yourselves. The scene continues as you might expect. However, once Beerus announces to both Goku and Vegeta that he plans on having the strongest person he's ever faced join the squad, both Goku and Vegeta's reactions are pretty insightful and encapsulate their characters perfectly, I think. Goku and Vegeta are tremendous warriors, both men being metaphors for contrasting versions of self-improvement. Vegeta's anger and jealousy directed towards people that are stronger than him is a clear indicator that he is driven by inferiority, validation, and pride. On the other hand, Goku channels childlike enthusiasm and excitement when he hears that an impossibly strong foe is nearing. Goku trains to defeat himself. This all goes back to the beginning of Dragon Ball, where Master Roshi instilled in him the philosophy that there will always be someone stronger. Goku will always be a superior fighter to Vegeta for this reason. Passion will lead you to places people have never been before, where pride will make you chase those that have reached heights thought to be unreachable. Vegeta's character will always end up being Goku's lesser for this reason. For those of you that haven't seen The Last Airbender, not the movie, there's a quote that I think suits Vegeta's character perfectly. Pride is not the opposite of shame, but its source. True humility is the only antidote to shame. Or as Whis has said it in the movie, anime, and manga now, Vegeta is wound too tight. As for more differences in this chapter, this is the first time we actually get to see Jacko in tights. Jacko agrees to bring Bulma to see Zuno, a being that knows, well, everything. Convenient, I know. You might notice also that Jacko's ship has a different design. At this point in the anime, it is circular. We then switch scenes to Champa and Vados preparing the tournament stadium. The design for the stadium is different to the anime's interpretation. It has a sort of Egyptian theme, perfectly in keeping with Beerus and Champa's Egyptian cat-style character designs. Or at least I think it is. Chapter 7. Warriors of Universe 6. This chapter actually has quite a few key differences. The first being when Jacko and Bulma arrive on Zuno's planet. In the anime, Jacko arrests Bertman, and in the process of doing so, saves some of the attendants to Zuno. As a sign of gratitude, they are allowed to take Bertman's spot in line and meet the Zune Man himself. In the manga, they just sort of walk in. You'd think that a guy like Zuno would have some sort of line to meet him. I don't know. By the way, fun fact, did you know that Zuno means brain or intellect in Japanese? The scene finishes as you would expect, with us getting a boatload of exposition regarding the Super Dragon Balls, the same as in the anime. The scene then switches to Goku and Vegeta sparring in the hyperbolic time chamber. This scene takes place in the anime also, discussing the same topic. What is different is how it ends. Both Goku and Vegeta realize that in the time chamber, they can go all out without a worry of destroying anything. Goku goes on to say, "Let's do this right, just like the good old days." Both Goku and Vegeta take these poses, just like all those years ago. Continued by 3 more panels until it fades out. Gorgeous scene. Beautifully nostalgic. With a turn to the next page, there is a time skip. All the Universe 7 fighters and spectators are aboard Whis' cube en route to the tournament grounds. In the anime, Goku's first time meeting Monaka takes place on Beerus' planet, but in the manga, Goku meets the little guy aboard the cube instead. The same goes for King Jinja, who in the anime was introduced by Jacko to the group on Earth while waiting for the cube to arrive. Our group lands and acquaint themselves with the other Kais who've arrived already, much like in the anime. Only this time we actually know the backstory for how the Supreme Kai of Universe 7 split, which is really swell. The last notable difference in the manga is the unveiling of the Universe 6 fighters. There is a slow reveal for these guys as they line up before Universe 7's squad. It's quite suspenseful and really utilizes well the panel-based structure of the manga. The anime had an alternate approach, having them seated waiting for the event to begin. Chapter 8. The match begins. This is a fun one. With the beginning of this chapter, we see the fighters from both universes take their seats in preparation for the exam to qualify for the tournament. So, the pressure is on. In the anime, Boo falls asleep midways through the exam. The manga had a slightly different approach. He gets every question wrong and misspells his name. We also get to see Goku's actual test scores on paper, which is sort of neat. What's weird is how Goku gets stumped by the same question in both the anime and the manga. Pretty much the exact same question verbatim. Given how the manga and the anime have so many differences thus far, the fact that this obscure question in the exam is what remains consistent is hysterical. What is a little different is the opening bout with Botamo. It covers the opening moments of the fight and in short is much more complex and interesting than the anime's interpretation. Chapter 9. Goku vs. Botamo. The battle of Goku vs. Botamo rages on, and really this one hits all the same notes as the anime. I would say fans of the show who didn't really care for this exchange should give the manga a go. There is just enough variation and the fight itself seems longer too. However, the ending remains the same. Goku throws Botamo out of the ring, eliminating him. Which means up next is Frost on Goku's chopping block. He arrives face to face with Goku carrying a big smile and a friendly demeanor. As the fight begins, the most glaring difference is that, unlike the anime, Frost doesn't get any backstory exposition as to why he is considered a good person in that universe. In the manga, it's all conveyed through his well-mannered approach and dialogue combined with charming expressions. In the fight department, there are some awesome-looking stills from this match too, but there's no tackle through a Kamehameha like in the anime. But excluding that, it's still an engaging read. Chapter 10. Frost's true the true colors of Frost. This was the first chapter that, when released, was behind the anime. Episode 33 of Dragon Ball Super was released on February 28th, 2016. And with that, the anime finally surpassed the manga. As is the pattern so far with the manga and anime, their fights are quite different, but they are bookended with key moments that they share. Taking this Frost and Goku fight, for example, this section of the fight takes off from when Goku powers up to Super Saiyan and ultimately ends when Frost knocks Goku out of the ring. They both begin at point A and end at point B. What is interesting is how they get to each point, especially in the fight sequences. Perhaps you liked that moment when Goku caught Frost's punch in the anime, but you might also like the artwork, extended choreography, and cockiness of Goku from the manga. In terms of a narrative, this fight varied little. Goku transforms, he's too much for Frost. Frost transforms, and Goku is still too much. Frost cheats. Roll credits, you get the picture. What's actually interesting is how Piccolo's fight differs. The anime's narrative is as follows. Goku informs Piccolo that he has no chance, and therefore, Piccolo opts to focus solely on the Makanko Sapo, or Special Beam Cannon. The rest of the fight consists of Piccolo dodging until he finally traps Frost in his Namekian arm stretch thing. Frost then decides to cheat to pick up the victory. The manga decides to take this in a different direction. Goku still tells Piccolo he has no chance, but as Frost attacks, Piccolo vanishes. Frost fires a flurry of blasts at Piccolo, who continues to dodge. Vados and Champa then wonder if this guy is a Namekian, that he seems different somehow, to which Piccolo responds, "I am no Namekian, I am the Demon King Piccolo reincarnated," which I gotta say is a pretty awesome slice of dialogue. The match continues and ultimately, Frost decides that he has had enough and goes on to cheat to defeat Piccolo. Considering everything, this match took a very different turn. Piccolo was weaker in the anime, but had victory on the horizon as he used his intellect to best Frost. The manga decided to have him go toe-to-toe with Frost instead. Either way, they both ended up with the same outcome. Piccolo left poisoned and unconscious at the hands of Frost. Chapter 11. Vegeta takes the stage. So, Vegeta is up next against Frost, and as you might expect, it's pretty brutal. Probably a bit more brutal than you might have remembered from the anime. The anime's interpretation of this bout had Vegeta not waste any time with Frost, one punching him like Saitama out of consciousness and the ring. Now, the manga decided to tap a bit more into Vegeta's sadistic nature, and while the fight isn't much longer, Vegeta does take a bit more satisfaction in victimizing and humiliating Frost in front of everyone. You can tell by that innocent smile in his face that he has nothing but the best in... Yikes. So, Frost's eliminated. So next up is Magetta. Maggie. Which again differs greatly from manga to anime. Vegeta isn't cocky going into this fight, and when Vegeta goes Super Saiyan, he can't even muster the strength to lift this guy. We later find out that Maggie weighs over 1,000 tons. which I gotta say seems kinda strange. I don't have a problem with Maggie being that heavy, but Vegeta not being able to lift him? Something I would have for sure thought to be within Vegeta's capabilities as a Super Saiyan. This confrontation doesn't have any outer boundaries set by Champa either, so Vegeta is free to fly to his heart's content. Also, the manga's battle is much shorter, which I gotta say is a rarity thus far in the tournament. However, it ends in the same fashion. Vegeta calling Maggie some mean names. Rusted tin can shit bucket. Fucking classic. Chapter 12, Saiyan's Pride. This chapter is kept to a very high standard. The artwork, stellar, the narrative, tight, and the battle between Kaba and Vegeta is intense and emotional. Some key moments that differ from the anime include Kaba using the sunlight to gain an advantage fighting Vegeta. There are no dual Gallic guns, but Kaba's transformation mid-air in defense of a blast attack from Vegeta has to be a highlight. This version of the battle has some great choreography, but I feel could have been made better borrowing a line from the anime. As Vegeta goes Super Saiyan Blue to show Kaba what he has still yet to attain, he punches him, whispering into his ear, "Never forget this feeling." But that's just a small gripe. This was still an amazing fight. So Kaba goes to sit down on the loser bench because he's a loser. And Vegeta stands face to face with Hit, the final fighter for Universe 6. The battle begins and immediately Vegeta powers up to Super Saiyan Blue. Just look at it. It's so fucking awesome. This is Toyotaro at the peak of his powers. The rest of the fight follows the manga pretty much beat for beat. The biggest difference is that Vegeta in this sequence has no inner dialogue. The entire time he is fighting, the narrative is driven by Goku and the others trying to decipher what exactly Hit is up to, until boom, the fight is over. As Goku makes his way to the ring, Whis lets on that he knows how to counter Hit's time skip ability, but does not tell Goku as he values this as a training exercise. Chapter 13. The victorious universe is finally decided. The battle begins. The first notable difference comes when Goku made contact with Hit in the manga, connecting twice compared to the anime's once in base form. The dialogue between Hit and Goku is great in the manga. After Goku starts to figure out Hit's movements, Hit boasts that he'll simply change them. Goku points out that he won't be able to change his movements so easily. He does mention this in the anime too, but goes on to qualify it in the manga by saying, Hit wears a long coat with his hands in his pockets to cover his legs' movements. With that information, Goku could then infer that Hit's movements were by habit and not circumstantial, much more difficult to correct or change on the fly. Goku's a fucking genius! The battle continues, and then the biggest difference in the series happens. Goku channels Super Saiyan God. Not the blue one, the red-haired one. This is significant because in the anime, this is a form only attainable through ritual with 6 pure-hearted Saiyans. The blue-haired form is the result of a Saiyan who has attained proper ki control or God ki while going Super Saiyan. Hit begins to then have a spot of difficulty implementing the time skip technique. In the manga, Whis drops this juicy nugget of exposition on why the time skip ability is having performance issues on Goku. In short, he explains that the move works best on those whose power is equal to or less than the user. Whis just, albeit indirectly, said that Goku is now more powerful than Hit. Furthermore, he explains why Vegeta had such problems in his God form against Hit, and it's due to him powering down after he used his blue form against Kaba. Even though the form has great ki control, the ignition for the transformation burns tons of stamina. It isn't a transformation that can be turned on and off like a switch. So when Vegeta went Super Saiyan Blue against Hit, his second time using it in the tournament, he was at 1/10 the strength of his maximum power. None of this is explained in the anime and really makes Vegeta look as if he is miles behind Goku. So thank you, manga. But that's not the only difference in this chapter. Hit actually powers up in this fight. No, it isn't just for show like in the anime, he actually powers up. The manga's version also seems to have Hit less composed. Oh, and at this point I should probably mention, there is no Kaioken times 10 in the manga. Moving on, the most significant difference in terms of a narrative is that while the anime insinuates Hit and Goku were neck and neck while Goku was using Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken times 10, the manga's version had Hit against the ropes. Goku goes on to quit in the manga because of the rules restraining Hit. In the anime, there was that, but there was also a bit of displeasure in being used as a pawn by Beerus. So this is one of few instances where I think a fight ended not hitting the same notes in both the anime and the manga. However, the rest of the chapter follows the anime perfectly, wrapping up the arc in a nice red bow. Chapter 14, an SOS from the future. The first thing I want to draw attention to with this chapter is that it is absolutely gorgeous. From the very first 2 pages, which instill the reader with a sense of isolation and despair, to the final scene, which is both chilling and tragic. This is by far my favorite chapter. The first notable difference is that in the manga, we don't get to see Bulma die. Instead, picking up with Trunks en route to meet Mai, while he evades the blasts of a shadowed pursuer through the streets of a ruined city. While all this is happening, the guys, including Tights, are chilling in the present while Goku and Vegeta spar. During this, Jocko explains to Bulma about parallel universes, which is interesting seeing as the teacher in this scene, instead of teaching math like in the anime, teaches about parallel universes. This forms the reader's education for the coming arc. A second noteworthy moment from this scene comes from Whis, who explains that his time leap can't work for now as it has a substantial recharge phase. He states that attempting to do so will offset the time access, thus creating a new timeline. Again, important exposition for later. The main body of the story in Trunks' timeline continues similar to the anime right up until the final scene, where both Trunks and Mai, in search of a time machine, seek refuge from Black in an old, rundown Capsule Corp building. As they enter, a voice from a neighboring rooftop addresses them. In retaliation to this, Trunks fires a ki blast in the direction of the voice, before dragging Mai quickly inside the crumbling building. All the shots in this scene are very atmospheric. The use of grey tones and environment is spectacular and really helps set the mood for the scene. Black returns fire in the direction of Trunks, who dives to protect Mai. He instructs her to run to the time machine while she still has a chance, and that he will buy some time while she escapes. Trunks then moves to confront Black, and in this sequence, the illustrations are just spectacular. As Trunks is on the floor waiting for Black to end it all, out of nowhere, Mai shoots a barrel of fuel, igniting the room and stunning Black. In retaliation, Black fires a blast, knocking Mai from the balcony to the floor, covering her in rubble. The panels where Trunks searches for Mai are heartbreaking to say the least. Trunks stares in shock at Mai lying motionless beneath the rubble. Black moves closer. The barrels of fuel ignite and the area is illuminated, revealing the foe Trunks has been facing this entire time, Goku. And with that, brings about an end to that chapter. Fades to black. Chapter 15. Hope, once again. This chapter picks up right where we left off, with Black staring down Trunks in the burning building. The overall narrative of this battle is the same as the anime. It even has that sudden power-up from Trunks coupled with the Misenko Blast. The overall combat choreography is changed, however, making for some stunning panels that manage to add some suspense to a fight I already knew the ending to. Trunks eventually manages to buy some time to flee for the time machine. As he attempts to escape to the past, the time machine becomes entangled on some cabling. Black takes this opportunity to fire a Kamehameha at the machine carrying Trunks, who moments before certain death manages to free himself, vanishing from Black's view, leaving him unaware of what just happened. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it. There is more to this chapter and there are more differences to cover in further chapters, but I'm going to leave that for another day. Right now, I'd love to give you guys the chance to read some of that manga the way it's intended. Now, before I move ahead to my final thoughts, here's a list of things the anime had, but the manga did not. Trunks and Goten's Water Snake Adventure, Episode 2 entirely. All the Hijinx with Goku and Kinkai's planet. All the prep for Bulma's birthday celebration on the yacht. Vegeta's training in the gravity chamber. No peel-off gang, trying to appease Lord Beerus through food. Rock, paper, scissors with Oolong. Whis talking with Vegeta. Punching Krillin. Beerus vs. Champa's scuffle. The entire Frieza arc. Goku and Vegeta asking Piccolo and Buu to join the team. Gohan training. Jocko and Burpman. Post-training beards. Earth boarding of the cube. Punching Monaka. Collecting Monaka on Beerus' planet. Majin Buu falling asleep during exam. Tackling through Goku's Kamehameha. Evil Frost reveal pose. Special beam cannon. No boundary box against Vegeta. Gallic gun and final flash to Maggie. That one punch from hit that Vegeta caught. Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken times 10, the entire Batafu arc. The question you might still be asking yourself at this time is, which is better, the anime or the manga? I've given you the info, so really it's all down to personal preference and how you like your Dragon Ball. What do I think? My hope is that having watched through this video, you realize that's the wrong question to be asking. Which one should be looked at first is a more fitting question, I think. Both, when combined, help paint a much broader, more detailed picture of the overall story. The manga touches on things the anime doesn't and vice versa. As for my thoughts, I imagine, like many before me, when checking out this manga, began reading with an air of cynicism. I knew it wasn't penned by Toriyama and was preparing myself for a shift in soul. For myself and many others, Dragon Ball has been around since we were children. The trouble with these childhood franchises is that over time, they can change into something else entirely. I think that's why GT didn't really work. It lost something. The trouble is, when your description of the missing ingredient is something or soul, it makes it understandably an impossibly difficult task to find someone to facilitate the correct kind of progression long-term fans enjoy. Now, don't get me wrong, the anime and the manga, they are very different. But I think that's the point. For the first time in Dragon Ball's history, the manga and the anime are being released side by side. To combat this, both are providing things the others aren't, giving us alternate scenarios to some of the key moments and scenes. For whatever standout moments Super has shown us, the manga has one equally as awesome. In many ways, Toyotaro is a perfect illusion. Armed with Toriyama's scripts, and an art style that even Toriyama himself concedes as being the closest he has ever seen to his own, it makes for a perfect recipe that I feel most Dragon Ball fans will love. But don't take my word for it, check it out for yourselves. These have been the differences in the Dragon Ball Super anime and manga. Please support original Dragon Ball merchandising. I've been Totally Not Mark. Thank you so much for watching.